Hey, how's it going there, folks? Welcome back here to a Sunday. It is the Earthmaster out here, about 11:09 a.m. here, California time, May 19th, 2024. Latest activity here shows some movement up into the Alaska area with a 1.8. We did see some larger movement early this morning, a 6.0 stirring up out here across the Aleutian Trench, along with a handful of other smaller quakes in this area. Getting a little bit of squeezing going on up here across the northern area of the Pacific Plate. Now, all this activity stirring up along with Southern California out here, which is still seeing some earthquake activity, and a newer event here just north of our swarming region. We did see a 3.3 earthquake coming into the Ridgecrest area, which is north here of the Garlock Fault shear zone. That earthquake coming in at about 8 kilometers deep within the last hour. Now we're seeing things stir back up out here in our swarming area, which sits just south of the Brawley area, which is the extensional, well, the Brawley seismic zone is an extensional fault boundary, plate boundary of the San Andreas Fault, which then runs into the Imperial Fault. Now, it looks like it's halted right there within this region. Haven't really seen any migration pattern overnight, aside from this little three-pointer well north of the area. And that tells me that regional stress is still quite high in this area. As I mentioned in my previous videos here, we have to go back roughly the last 7 days or so and see the migration pattern that has happened from the south here, off the Imperial Fault to where we're at right now. We've seen a handful of smaller quakes here, but really no major swarming out here north of this area of interest. Here's the movement earlier in the week. Most of this activity on the 14th, 13th, or the 14th, so roughly about 4 or 5 days ago. Pretty decent amount of earthquake swarming, and I'm sure there was probably a lot more than what was reported here. And just in this area alone, a few days ago, there was about 65 earthquakes. So we're up here north a little bit, roughly about, about 25 miles or so from this older swarming area. And we're sitting at, right now, a total tally of earthquakes here, about 240 earthquakes. Now, that's a pretty decent amount of earthquake activity out here, and really no main quake. Similar to the swarm down south here, there's really no main quake in this sequence of earthquakes. The largest magnitude here being a 3.9 from yesterday. Overnight, let's see what we got here. Mostly ones stirring up here this morning, a couple twos as well. So this is an ongoing thing. It looks like may have had a little temporary break or so in the amount of earthquakes following that movement up north here into the Aleutian Trench. Now, I know, obviously, the Aleutian Trench, doesn't matter if it's the Aleutian Trench, the Japan area, Taiwan, Papua New Guinea, whenever you get some adjustment going on out here across the plate boundary, it does affect what goes on. For example, down here in Southern California, we've seen many geologists and scientists claim that the 9-pointer back in 2011 that Japan seen, due to the large shift in the land out here, relieved stress out here across the west coast for the time being. And a lot of times we'll see large-scale earthquake activity happen, whether it be Alaska, Japan, similar to the 9.1. It doesn't really have to be a 9.1. But, for example, a 6-pointer relieves strain out here across the area temporarily. It does look like that took place early this morning, but we're coming back now in regards to the elevated activity out here. So I don't think we're done yet here with the California region. Still got the earthquake watch going on. We haven't really seen any large major earthquake movement across the western Pacific here. Yes, a little adjustment up north here in the Aleutian Trench, but doesn't look like it's had too much of an effect on the Southern California area. Again, no migrational pattern. That's what we got to watch for in terms of the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault, right? There is a triggering zone out here. The question is, how close does it need to be? How close does a swarm need to be in order to, trigger a domino effect out here? Because things are pretty well wound tight, so to speak, about as tight as they can get here along this plate boundary. The southern branch of the San Andreas Fault has not seen a full rupture out here in over 300 years. So 1812, they did see a little, I think it was a 7.5 out here, which is not, I mean, this area is capable of producing a little bit bigger one. As far as the full rupture goes, we have not seen anything on the southern branch in over 300 years. So any type of swarming, any type of migrational movement up and down here very close to the plate boundary is something to watch closely, I think, right? It just makes sense. This isn't moving away. This is moving northward here along this plate boundary. It all started off here with a swarm south of the border. We're working its way up here at the end of this plate boundary now. And this is kind of a bend area. You can see if we remove some of these earthquakes here, you can see the mountain ranges and whatnot. These other fault systems out here form from the stress within this area. Now, just because they have it a different name, the Imperial Fault, the Brawley Seismic Zone, it's still related to one another here. There's just a little segment that's offset before it goes into the Brawley Seismic Zone and then into the San Andreas Fault, the plate boundary there. But names, we can just pretty much disregard it. They use it as just a way to point an area on the map. But it's close. Whether this is triggering zone material or not, we'll have to watch it. We have seen some swarms in the past a little bit closer here. But still, we're awfully close. We don't want to be waking this sleeping giant up because that will produce an 8.1 earthquake out here. And ultimately, oh man, that I couldn't even imagine the damage and potential that would go along with an 8.1 out here today. So we'll continue to watch that. 3.3 up in Ridgecrest, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, still tells me that there's an overall sign of strain out here in Southern California, and specifically in these areas that we're seeing right now. So we'll watch this throughout the day today, see if things stir back up, maybe up around the Salton Sea area. I do have a few seismograph stations up there monitoring. Barrett, which is in the Southern California area, and also the Anza station right here has been picking up on some of it. This seismograph looks a little bit more active, though. It looks like a lot of little small quakes in the area, and that specific seismograph station is roughly probably right around here, not at the epicenter of the swarming, but a little bit further to the west here. So it does look like there's some other smaller earthquake activity taking place here, but not showing up on the USGS map. But when we do get the twos out here and some of these upper ones, and obviously something bigger, we'll see those show up on that seismograph station. Northern California, fairly quiet. Not a whole lot going on up north. Pacific Northwest as well. Yellowstone National Park, I don't think we got anything major going on there, but we'll double check. It is a super volcano, and swarms do stir up out there on occasion. This seismograph overview here gives you an overview, layout overview of the Yellowstone region, and I think we can all spot that 6-pointer that popped off there in the Aleutian Trench this morning. That's not a local seismic event there at Yellowstone, but the 6-pointer along the Aleutian Trench. So this goes to tell me and show us that these seismograph stations are working properly, some of them, and that they're picking up readings there at a distance, thousands of miles away there from Yellowstone to the Aleutian Trench where that 6-pointer struck this morning. As far as local seismic activity goes, doesn't look like it. We're starting to get the wind events stirring up back out here in the afternoon again. It's a common feature. It stirs up for a few hours and then it goes away. No magma movement, no doom and gloom here on this image. Go back here to the rest of the map, and we're getting some activity stirring up out in Texas, Oklahoma, a little bit in Louisiana. The Aleutian or the Appalachian Mountains here, a handful of smaller quakes, a New Madrid seismic zone, quiet for now. That's going to be this area centered around Memphis, Little Rock area, a major hazardous area in terms of producing large earthquake activity. It is quiet for now, but we did see a 3-pointer stir up out here right in the middle of this hazard area earlier. Looks like about 3 days or so ago. So just kind of keeping an eye on it. Back in 1811, 1812, we did see a series of large earthquakes in the mid-7 range, potentially larger. that took place out here over a period of a few months. And that type of activity today would be quite devastating due to the population density that exists out here today. Obviously, it wasn't like this with the population density centers nearby back in the early 1800s. And in fact, these upper sevens and mid sevens here can ring the earth like a bell, even at a distance out here. We're talking about hundreds of miles out away from the epicenter. Can do some damage because of the type of rock structure that exists out here in this region. So we'll continue to watch that, but today, like I say, it's pretty quiet. Movement out in the Atlantic Ocean earlier this morning as well, 5.0 in these oceanic. This is going to be a fracture zone right here, it looks like, just off the fracture zone. The Atlantis fracture zone, it looks like. Which could stir up some further activity up north around Iceland. Let's go check that out real quick, see what we got for the earthquake activity currently taking place around the Iceland region. So we got about 89 earthquakes stirring up out here. A pretty decent swarm away from the Grindavik area. Of course, up here around the crater area, around Hagafell, Slingerfell, is where we've seen our most recent eruption here. Almost lasted for about 2 months here. Take place, but this swarm is definitely much further south here of the area. Gotta watch that. Things are definitely a little bit more heightened out here today. Also some movement here in the Grindavik area, that community, the little village town out here, and also in the crater region as well. Let me go over and check out the update, see if they have an update. I don't think they do, because they normally don't put anything out on the weekend unless there's something major going on. Let's see here. This one was put out a couple days ago. So they just basically, this is the Icelandic Met Office, and they're keeping an eye on the region below because of magma accumulation. There's been about 16 million cubic meters of magma that has been added to the magma chamber since March 16th. So things are looking like we could see a magma intrusion event take place somewhere, whether it's at the area of our most recent eruption, or we're going to see it pop off somewhere down south around the Grindavik area, or maybe even further south away from the area. Here's our current inflation chart. Again, up there around 16 million cubic meters of magma. The stars here representative of when the eruption took place. So at the end of the peak level of inflation here is the past events. Notice we haven't seen that yet. All this activity stirred up and inflated while we're still seeing an ongoing eruption here over the last couple months. So keep an eye on it. Things are quite inflated underneath the area. The key to watch for an eruption is going to be large-scale earthquake activity in a very short time span. So we'll continue to keep an eye on the Iceland region. But it does look like there's a lot of divergent activity out here across the oceanic rift zones. So we'll watch that today. Down around Puerto Rico, mostly smaller 2s and a couple 3s thrown in here as well. Really nothing major going on. Down across the Middle America Trench, looks like we've seen a 5.2 here off the plate boundary of Mexico. A little bit of further activity. There's a 4-pointer right there into the Gulf of California area, not showing up here on the USGS map, but that's pretty important because it goes to show that things are still continuing on an amplified scale across Southern California and through the Gulf of California region. This is definitely an area of interest out here today. A 4-pointer right there, just south of our area that we're seeing in Southern Cal, probably right about here. But to us humans here, obviously that might seem like a long distance from Southern California down here to the, say, for example, the tip of Baja California, right? It's a little drive, and more so for a walk. But tectonically speaking, this is just a fraction of the plate. And this area, what goes on down here can have a major effect up north here along the plate boundary. And I think that's what we're seeing, why we're seeing the continued activity out here today with the swarming in Southern California. And it's just good to be on guard, right? Good to be on guard. Keep your eye on this area. Watch for migration. A lot of people claim, well, this is normal. these swarms come and go. Well, one of these days, it's not just going to come, it's going to come with a domino effect that could trigger the San Andreas Fault. Little swarms have been known to create bigger events out there. And in the area of interest right now where we're at a little point here along the plate boundary where it somewhat separates but also builds up strain and mountains within this area. You can see some of the other fault systems away from here. The question is if we're going to see that migrate here. It's got to be adding strain out here. Ultimately, earthquakes can relieve strain along one area of the plate boundary or fault system, but also at the same time that motion and momentum is going to travel somewhere else. And in this case, it's working its way up northward. Hawaii, still seeing some activity stirring up around the Kilauea volcano. Let's go check that out real quick, see what we have. It's been an area of interest here because, well, got a whole lot of magma accumulation underneath this area as well. Kilauea volcano still sitting at a yellow and advisory. Latest update. Let's see if we got the latest update out here today. It was put out yesterday. That status update there from yesterday. So doesn't look like they put out an update yet. They probably will a little bit later on today, but we'll check out the deformation data. Looks like we're going down a little bit. That could be displacement of magma happening around the area of the summit or further off to the east rift zone. But we got to watch that. Obviously, we're at an inflated level more so than what we've seen at any given time since 2018. Since the 2018 eruption where we had that event take place across the East Rift Zone. So we'll continue to keep an eye on it. Typical movement going on down south here, Pahala, the deeper regions, about 30 kilometers here. Let's see here, down south into the South Pacific. This is an older quake, but when did this one stir up? Looks like from yesterday. So not a whole lot of newer quake activity out here today in the south. New Zealand definitely seen a little bit of adjustment, it looks like, on the deeper scale of things. Threes. There's all that deep activity underneath North Island again. It's been a hot spot for deep activity recently. And the deeper activity is associated with the subduction zone that sits just off the east coast here of the North Island, part of the South Island as well, right here. You can see it pretty fairly nicely on the graph. That's capable. They did a little scenario of a 9-pointer out here, and there's a lot of uncertainty on when the exact last one took place, but it's been a while. Similar to the Cascadia subduction zone and other areas that are well overdue for a big quake. It's been a little while. So we've been living in some quiet times here recently, but that's not always going to be the case. Further out and about here, a little bit of movement in Western Australia with a couple 2s stirring up out there. 4.4 along the Java Trench. Really nothing major happening in this area of the world today. Just typical movement. So we'll watch this throughout the day. Keep an eye on SoCal, leaving up the earthquake watch because we're still getting some earthquakes. Another earthquake here, 2.2 in the last few minutes or so here. Let me get a total tally once again, see what we got for all magnitudes, just specifically this area. So we're at about 246 earthquakes. That includes today and yesterday. And yesterday morning, early morning, about 1 o'clock in the morning, not last night, but the previous night, is when this swarm started. So that's still a lot of earthquake activity out here. All right, let's check out the space weather activity. We did have a little flaring event take place, really sharp, impulsive M flares here over the last few hours, it looks like. Really nothing big, no major X flare events. Those are coming off of 3685 here, I believe, which is a pretty decent sized sunspot. It's going through some type of either a decay stage or reorganization back here. It doesn't look as quite complex as what it did when it was coming around the eastern limb of the sun, but it does look like we're seeing a little bit of M flare activity around that center core. The sunspot region down here looks a little bit more amplified today, but overall It's somewhat quiet compared to what we've seen here, with all the auroras a week or so ago and all that X flare activity. Goodness. So our main sunspots to watch, 3679 and 3685, and those are the sunspots I mentioned. 3679 is going to be this area right here. A little bit of not much, but there's a little bit of dynamics here within that sunspot. Let's check the overall threat for flaring. It's diminishing, but it's still up there somewhat. 99% chance for a C flare, M flare at 50, X flare around 10% chance or so. Proton event has pretty much diminished. Haven't really seen any, bombardment with the protons here recently. There's our two M flares, 3685. Of course, that's going to be that sunspot, as noted here. Large, but it's not as complex as I'd like to see it in terms of producing some nice flares and maybe some auroras in the days ahead, but right now that doesn't look like it's going to happen. There is a G1 class storm. It looks like KP index 4 to 5. Let me go over here and see where that was coming from. Earth in the green circle right here. This is the sun. CME was produced, it looks like. That was the large, long duration M flare from that far side, or it was a sunspot just coming around the eastern limb, which is now obviously more viewable, 3685. That did produce a long duration M flare and also a subsequent CME. Not Earth directed, but it does look like we're going to get barely a glancing hit. Sometimes these events, though, completely miss us. So not looking promising, though. But they are forecasting what could be maybe a G1 class storm here on the May 20th UTC time. I'm guessing right about here between 6 and 1200. Current UTC time, by the way, is May 19th. So this would be a tomorrow event. And or late tonight, early tomorrow morning. We'll have to see with that time frame. We'll check back on that a little bit later on this evening. Severe weather, they kind of ramped this up out here a little bit. Centered over the beautiful state of Kansas. Hopefully one of these days I'll call this area my home, or maybe even Nebraska. I'd absolutely love this area out here. We got a moderate risk for some severe weather, and that includes a 5% chance for tornadoes, but mainly wind and some very large hail going to be falling out of the sky. So you kick up that updraft and create some big hail along with some high wind, and you got baseballs flying out of the sky at 70 miles an hour. Can do some damage out there around Salina, Hutchinson. Again, centered over central Kansas area, it looks like, but that hatched area extends further out and about from that 45% zone. So heads up. Looks like a big-time severe weather day. The tornado threat is not zero, but it's not super elevated compared to what the other severe weather threats are. But either way, keep an eye on the sky. 5% zone there, and 2% extending further into Iowa area, it looks like. All right, folks, I'm out of here. Going to enjoy the rest of the day. A little bit cooler out here in Northern California. I think we're sitting at 71 right now. It's not bad. It's supposed to be in the low 80s, mid 80s maybe. So we'll continue to watch this. Live stream is up and running with continuous 24/7 data. If something does happen out here today, a little adjustment, we'll jump back on and cover the updates and whatnot. Enjoy your Sunday, folks. Stay safe out there. Catch you guys back out here in a little bit.